Okay. Looks like it's recording. So I'm going to go ahead and start just with the intro and the reminders about what we're doing and why, and sort of what the expectations are, because I know there's still a little bit of confusion. Here, I'll turn on my video. Hi, everyone. Working remotely today. My name is Tom Qualls. I'm with the Department of Indigent Defense Services, and we are here for LegalServer training. Ron with LegalServer is going to be your able guide here today, and I'm going to turn it over to him in just a minute. But first, I just wanted to do a little housekeeping. We're here basically because the Davis settlement, which I think everyone is aware of at this point, has mandated uniform reporting of certain data from across the state. And so DID's role is to kind of make that as easy as possible for you. And to make it uniform, we have selected LegalServer as a case management and data recording system, and we are providing it to all of you free of cost along with these trainings. We're not expecting you to immediately take your entire existing caseload and put it on here. We understand that this is going to be a process. We're starting this early in June so that you have the option to start July 1st with, so we have like a full year, full fiscal year of reporting. So that would help us and ultimately help you when we're going to the legislature to seek money on your behalf. But basically, the regulations just require that you start using LegalServer at the same time your plan goes into effect, so in September. Again, it's probably ideal for everyone to start at July 1st, help you and help us, but different offices are going to be able to do that differently. What we want you to do is whenever you start using it, and ideally July 1st, you start just putting in your new cases, and then kind of draw a line in the sand, and that's what you use moving forward as you get all new cases in. And then as you have time and administrative resources allow, you're able to migrate your existing caseload into the database. Obviously, any time along the way on this onboarding, you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us, either myself or Stan, or if we can't, John or someone from LegalServer, we will find the answers and help you. We're still making adjustments. So if you see things that need added, or if you don't understand something, again, just let us know. So this week we're doing just basic introductory stuff with LegalServer. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ron. Thanks, Ron.
All right. Well, let's see. You're all at Pacific time, right? So it's afternoon everywhere, right? So I'll say good afternoon, everyone. As Tom said, my name is Ron. I do work at LegalServer, and I will be leading the training today. We're scheduled to go for 2 hours. Hopefully everybody can see my screen, or we've got our agenda up there. So we're going to do basically 2 things. We're going to do an introduction and overview to LegalServer, and then we're also going to walk at least through one of your intake processes to show you how you get somebody into your database. If you weren't on when we were talking about it in terms of questions, we do welcome questions during the session at any time. Feel free to, I think we've only got about 20 people in the meeting, so feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions that way. There is also a chat room in the Zoom meeting. If you haven't used Zoom before, if you float your mouse cursor over where you can see my screen, you should see, it typically shows up at the bottom, a little black bar will pop up and you can see where you can mute and unmute yourself. And then over towards the right, you'll see where you can click to go into the chat room and put things in there. If folks do put questions in the chat room, I may not miss them or I may not, see them immediately because I have a hard time doing two things at once, but I will definitely, before we wrap up, look at the chat room and do my best to answer any questions that we have over there. All right, so just an introduction to LegalServer itself. Common question, especially for a statewide, or larger organization, a lot of people that haven't been directly involved in it. Question is, so what's LegalServer that we're switching to? And, is this some weird piece of software that you all have gone out and bought that we're going to have to use, nobody else is using? Hopefully it'll reassure you to know LegalServer has been around a long time. So coming up on 20 years. And one of the big distinctions of LegalServer was it's been web-based from the beginning. So we're not, converting from some, in-office standalone system over to the web. So we've been, the big phrase is we've been web native from the beginning. We're about 325 organizations using LegalServer. Geographically, go from Honolulu to Coventry, UK, many points in between. Currently have 11 public defender and defender services type organizations are live with LegalServer. Quite a few like yourselves coming on board. And so you may at some point, getting large enough, you may actually run into somebody if none of you have actually used LegalServer at another organization. So obviously I work for the company, so take it as a grain of salt, but I think you will find LegalServer pretty easy to use. And we're constantly improving it and trying to make it better for everybody. We're going to be working today on what we call a demo site. And demo sites get created for a couple of reasons. One is what we're doing today, which is training. So we can go in and do things and we're not going to be working with, real data and so forth. So there's complete data separation between the demo site we'll be working on and what we call your live site you'll be getting at some point. That sounds like some of you will be starting on that in July. We also use the demo sites because people here at LegalServer have been working at people within, I think the acronym is DIDS, D-I-D-S, to customize LegalServer so that hopefully it's going to work well for you. So that is the group of people that the second little bullet point there, the site administrators that I'm referring to. Those are people that they have the advanced permissions within the system to do things. And so that's your first term to learn. So there'll be a lot of terminology learning, but site administrators is the first term to learn because you'll hear that over and over during these training sessions. As we'll say, well, your site administrators have decided, this is what's going to happen. When you get to this particular form, just to take like a trivial example, you get to a form, you're going to put in your client's gender. What do you see in that list? Do you see just male, female? Do you see male, female, transgender, male, female, transgender, unknown, refused to answer, doesn't know? Those types of things are things that your site administrators control. So we do have a question posted in the chat already, which I'll go ahead and try to answer. Is there an offline way to utilize LegalServer? We do actually have an offline app that is, I believe it's currently generally available. It was developed last year. I think it was finished up last year for Legal Services of Puerto Rico. Where they tend to have hurricanes and other natural disasters and lose power and internet service. So that's something that you'll have to talk with your site administrators about, whether or not what they want to get into that at some point. But yeah, and unless and until you decide to buy into the offline app, if you don't have an internet connection, yes, then you would just have to do things on paper or some other form, and then enter those after the fact. So yeah, it sounds like at least one or more of your offices may have spotty internet connections. And we also know that, like public defenders, you're going in, and some of our immigration clients are the same thing. You're going into detention centers, jails, prisons, other places, and you're not allowed to have your phone or a laptop or anything else. So of course, if you can't have your phone, then even the offline app is not going to help you, but that is going to be an option for you all going forward. All right, so I just want to go ahead and flip over to your demo site now so we can get into the specifics of it. And to do that, I'm just going to go to just have another browser tab open already. In terms of accessing LegalServer, you just go to a URL. So I've highlighted the URL at the top of the page. Your demo site is nevada-demo.legalserver.org. I don't know if there are plans to offer people access to the demo site. Some organizations do, some don't. If you get that opportunity, really encourage you to take advantage of it and get onto the demo site and play around. These trainings are wonderful and all that, but there's no substitute if you have the opportunity to actually get on, and actually, click around and do things on your own. The live site will be nevada.legalserver.org. It's going to be the same site for all of the different offices. And being a browser-based application, you can use all of your normal browser features that you're probably used to using. So for example, the first thing I want to do is just zoom in a little bit. So hopefully things are easier for you to see as we go along. And I didn't do anything within LegalServer to do that. I just used my browser's standard zoom feature. The other thing I always like to point out to people early so I don't forget it is that you can have multiple browser tabs open looking at different parts of LegalServer. So just as an example that may or may not be useful to you, but when I was using LegalServer as a staff attorney, of course, I had my home page, which we'll come back and talk about here in a minute, open throughout the day. And I worked at an organization where we had mandatory timekeeping. So I tended to start the day by right-clicking on the timekeeping tab at the top in the navigation bar, opening that in a new tab. And I would tend to keep that open throughout the day. And then I would also open various cases and various tabs. Don't do like I do, which is don't have your open tab list be your to-do list, but you can do that. I've got 4 cases I want to work on today, so I'll get them open in 4 tabs, and I'll just go through them, and work on them as I can. You're not required to use multiple tabs in LegalServer, so if you don't like having tons of tabs open, don't feel like you have to do that. So to log into LegalServer, of course, you need a valid username and password to get in. I see someone saying they can't hear. Looks like I'm seeing an indication that the audio is okay. Yeah, so Thomas just posted. Thank you for posting that. So he's posted the link to get into the meeting, and also to, or he's posted the Zoom meeting number there for you. All right, so once you have a valid username and password, which would come from your site administrators, you log into LegalServer and you land on your home page. Your home page is designed to show you information that's specific to you. So for example, the first tab you see here, My Assignments. These are all of the open and pending cases that I am assigned to based on my login. So there's more than 2 open and pending cases in the database, just that only 2 of those I'm actually assigned to. For those of you who handle cases, and that realize there could be a difference between talking about handling cases versus in real life versus handling cases in LegalServer. but for the most part, they're probably the same thing. This is, what I call your active case lists. So these are all of your open and pending cases that you're assigned to that at some point, are going to need work done on them. You also have an incomplete intakes tab on your homepage. If your role includes doing intakes, so entering people into the system, this tab can be helpful because this will show you any intakes that you've started but haven't finished. So typically we'll walk through an intake, but typically, you in terms of an intake, you start one and then you either finish it and it becomes a pending or an open case, or you reject it and it becomes a rejected matter. So typically, not a hard and fast rule, but typically your incomplete intakes list should be empty or very short. There's also a recently accessed cases tab on your homepage right now. This is going to show you any cases that you've looked at in LegalServer. So you're not necessarily assigned to them, but you have looked at them. And so that can be helpful at times for people. You also have a My Calendar tab. That's going to show you your events for the week, any LegalServer calendar events for the week.
Hey, Ron, just
Yes.
sorry to interrupt.
No.
Looks like there was a question about browsers. In my experience, you should be able to use any of those browsers, but is there any difficulty? Our experience is both Chrome and Explorer are fine, but do you know of any limitations or any browsers that LegalServer likes better?
Yeah, I mean, our user base is Chrome and Firefox, which is probably, last time we looked, probably 90-something% of our user base is on Chrome or Firefox. When you say Internet Explorer, do you mean literally Internet Explorer or Microsoft Edge?
Well, the question was Explorer, so
Okay.
I'm guessing that that's what she meant. Sometimes it defaults over if someone tries to use Explorer, it pushes them into the newer
Right.
version.
Yeah, so Internet Explorer is the only browser that I know of that you might run into some issues with. They are, as far as I know, they're pretty limited. And I think, I'm trying to think, the biggest thing that I remember with Internet Explorer is people were having trouble running reports. And so if you don't run reports, you probably won't run into that at all. I think Internet Explorer is on life support. It's Microsoft it's end of life, I think in 2022 sometime. So we just always tell people, if you have Microsoft Edge, if you need or want to or required to use the Microsoft browser and Edge is available to you, it will probably work better for you than Internet Explorer. Microsoft Edge is basically Chrome and, in a different skin. So.
Right. So you recommend Chrome if they can use it, or Firefox?
Yeah, that's my recommendation, just because that's what we use here. And as I say, the large percentage of our user base is using Chrome and Firefox.
Great. Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
Sure. No, not an interruption. It's good to know.
Okay.
Looks like somebody has a question for you about starting in July and entering cases.
We're starting in July. Do we just start entering cases we receive after that, or is someone supposed to enter all 50 to 75 active cases that we've already been appointed to? Yeah, again, so the ideal situation, there's what's ideal, and then there's kind of what's required. The ideal situation is that you would migrate over your existing caseload into the system, and it's going to show, based upon the information that you put in, whether it's a new case or an existing case, by the date that you put, as far as, when the charge was filed and when the case was opened. And then that way we'll know when we collect the data, whether it was a new case after July 1st or whether it's, an existing case. Again, we understand that it's going to take time to migrate over your existing caseload. You're not required to do any of this until the plan goes into effect in September, but part of what we're doing is collecting data from the whole fiscal year. Some of it's quarterly that we use, but the whole fiscal year starting in July, and taking that then to our request, we analyze that against the minimum or the maximum contribution formula, and then our job is to go to the state and get you any money that you need above that. And the more complete and accurate the data is that we have to go by, the more likely it is that we can get you that money. And again, we're building a database for the future too. So hopefully in the future, as the economy recovers, we're going to get a lot more money to help support the different counties. So I know that was a long answer, but again, only required to have everything migrated over and up starting in September. But the sooner you do it, the better it is for you and the easier it is for us in trying to help you out.
All right, and then you had one follow-up about are people going to be entering closed cases at some point?
Yeah, no, you don't need to migrate over any closed cases or past data, just cases that you're currently working when you start using the system. I mean, my advice would be just as soon as you feel comfortable, start entering new cases, and then as you have time, start pulling things over. So yeah, short answer to your question, only open cases, only cases that you're working right now. And then as new cases come in, just start putting them in as a matter of course.
All right. Well, I'm glad you're here because I would have had no idea about those questions.
Yeah, there's no reason you should know that.
All right. We're coming back to the home page. You got your My Calendar tab here. You also have a tab that you all have added called Office Calendar. And this actually is running an embedded report. And I'm going to guess this is showing me all of the calendar events that are coming up across an entire office. One of the things that you will learn in LegalServer is every user is assigned to an office and what we call a program. And my understanding is your database is set up in many different ways so that you will only, and sometimes you maybe can only see information that is specific to your office.
That's correct. That's something that LegalServer was really good at working with us on, which is to partition the different jurisdictions so one can't see the other one's data. So that's a really cool feature.
So I have a question posted, will my Google Calendar be able to populate the LegalServer calendar? And answer to that is no. There is a feature in LegalServer, if you all want to implement it, that will allow you to pull your LegalServer calendar events into Google Calendar or Outlook, any other calendar that you use. But it would be an external calendar or remote calendar is the usual term, excuse me, and it would be read-only over in Google Calendar. So you'd be able to see your LegalServer calendar events. So like you'd be able to see, oh, I've got, an arraignment tomorrow morning at 8:30 on your Google Calendar, but you would not be able to change anything. So if that got canceled, and you wanted to reflect that on your calendar, you would have to go over to LegalServer to change it or cancel it.
Yeah, it's a one-way thing too. So your LegalServer calendar will not be able to import the data from Google or Outlook, etc. So it's right, Ron. It's
Correct.
one way. You can take your LegalServer calendar into your other calendars, but not the other way.
Yeah. So we have a good question posted talking about different offices. We have somebody who does work in other counties. I don't think that's going to be an issue for you.
Actually, we just addressed that issue because that is unique. There are a couple of offices that work in multiple jurisdictions, and so actually, I'm going to have Stan maybe jump in and explain that a little bit more. Stan, are you comfortable answering that? Because we made it to where those offices have one account that includes both jurisdictions that they work in. Is that right, Stan?
That's correct. And I think we set it up for already one of our attorneys because he does work in 2 counties. And I'm trying to look on what Michael set up for that. So
John, feel free to jump in too if you have any information.
So go ahead and continue on. And once I get that info, I'll bring it up.
Yeah, but the answer to that is, yeah, we've addressed that and fixed that. And we can give you the details of that kind of, outside of this training later, if you want to email us or call.
Yeah, I'll provide that. So
thanks, Stan.
Okay. All right. So just as an example, we're talking about, things being limited by the office that you're in LegalServer. I'm going to go to the Cases tab in the green navigation bar. And I want to show you what you all have done over here, because you've done what we call an embedded report. So there's lists in LegalServer. So like on the home page, I was looking at my assignments and so forth. Those were lists of information. And over here, we have what's called an embedded report. So you have 2 different ways of displaying sort of, tabular data like this. The reason for the embedded reports in different places is going to be because you all have wanted to apply different filters to the data and lock down certain things. So for the most part, you'll just use these and you don't really need to know, is this a list, is this an embedded report? But since they do behave a little bit differently, I just want to make sure that we, explain it to people. So if I come over here to the Cases tab, and the Cases tab in traditional LegalServer is designed to show you all of the open and pending cases throughout an entire organization. So everything in the database. Now, that doesn't work for you all. So what you have done is you've put an embedded report on this page to replace the cases list. And if you notice, at the top of the report up here, I'm trying to highlight it so it shows up, but it's interesting, it doesn't let me highlight it. But if you can see where I'm pointing here, it says assigned office is matched to viewing user. So what that means is every case in LegalServer is assigned to an office in a program, just like users are assigned to an office in a program. And this report has a filter on it that says, don't show me all of the cases in the database. Only show me the open and pending cases that are in the office, that are assigned to the same office that my user account is assigned to. Sounds like I said that in a very confusing way. Hopefully it made sense. You may also notice that that filter on this embedded report has a little lock icon on it. I can't click on this and change this. So I can't say, you know, I'm in the Eureka office and I want to go look at Clark County offices or cases or something like that. In contrast, there's a filter for case disposition of open and pending. So if I want to say, well, you know, I'm interested in also closed cases in my office, I do have a little edit pencil next to that filter. So I can open up that filter and I can say, you know, I can see that I'm looking at open and pending cases, but I can come in here and click and say, I also want to see closed cases as well. If I change that filter like that, I've got an apply and refresh button to click on. So that would apply that filter and then it would refresh the data here. So you may notice that it went from, I think it was 11 cases to we're now seeing 17. And then if you look over here in this case disposition column, you can see we've got, you know, in addition to pending and open, we also have closed cases showing up here. So the question, is there a filter for county case number? So good question. So there's a button here called show more filters. And the answer is, I don't know, but let's find out. To show more filters. So you can see that expands. And these are the filters that have been built into this report. And this is something that your site administrators, your report writers control. So they can add and take away filters on these embedded reports over time, as you all need to. There is a case title filter here. I don't know if that corresponds to county case number.
This is Stan, and yeah, we set that up so that the counties can put their individual case numbers in that field.
Okay, so
That's what case title is, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so you would be able to come into this filter and you could actually enter a comma separated list of you know, case titles in here. You also have an option to say, you know, I want to filter this based on a contains filter. And that would just mean that, you know, you want to enter something like, I don't think we're going to get any results here, but assuming the county case number is, you know, something long, but you could enter something like 1, 2, 3, 4, and that would bring up any case where the case title field, you know, contains those letters or numbers that I put in here. I'm going to guess that's probably, oh, actually, we did pull up one. So we're not, oh yeah, there's the case title field. Sorry, I missed that. It's over there on the right. So you can see the case title is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on that case. And so my contains, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 brought that up. If I wanted to just, you know, search explicitly, I mean, I've got like, you know, is exactly, but I'd say there's a comma separated list. You could do that if you wanted to see, you know, more than one case number. So you can change these filters to get a different set of data. If you change the filters and you know, find out that, okay, there's the one case that's got, you know, 1, 2, 3, 4 in the case title, and then you're ready to get back to your default list. You know, so now I want to get back to showing all the open and pending cases in my office. You just need to refresh this page. So you can just do a Control R, or you can, you know, hit your browser's refresh button. So I'm going to do that. And that'll take a second. That's going to refresh. And well, it was actually 8 instead of 11. So we're back to the default filters of, you know, all open and pending cases in my office. Also over here on this cases page, you have an incomplete intakes tab. And so again, this is in distinction from the home page, which is only showing you your incomplete intakes. This is going to be looking at all incomplete intakes for your office. So I had none on my home page, but I can see we've got, you know, 28 incomplete intakes for the office that I'm assigned to right now. Now, it depends on permissions, but some of these embedded reports, you may also see a link like run the cases, list view, replacement report. Let's see if I get, yeah, it's going to let me do that. So this will just take you may notice it's taking you over to the reports section of the database, and it's just running this report. For the most part, you probably won't have any need to come over here and do that. Typically with embedded reports like that, sometimes people will want to do that for one of two reasons, and both of those involve the two icons. You should be able to see they're at the top right above the data table here. Well, I'll just click run report so we can see the report. And so they appear to the top right of the data table. The first icon is to export the data to Excel. The second icon is to print a report. So the export to Excel would export this data into an Excel sheet. I'll go ahead and do that just so you can see what that would look like. That is either going to just go ahead and download a file to your computer, depending on your browser settings. If you're using Chrome, by default, it just immediately downloads it into a downloads folder. I'm using Firefox. I have it set up to prompt me whenever I do anything on a website that says it wants to download a file. So I can say I either want to save it or I want to immediately open it. I'll go ahead and click on OK just so you can see what this will look like. So it's just going to open my spreadsheet program, and you can see there's the same data there. If this report had 300 results on it, I would get those 300 rows. If it had 1,000, I would get those 1,000, and so forth. A couple of things about downloading data like this to a spreadsheet. One is that this is the data at a point in time. So if somebody came and opened another case in the system in my office, so that there were 9 open cases in my office, that 9th case is not going to flow into the spreadsheet. Likewise, if I come over here and I'm looking at this data and I see, for example, I see, oh, somebody's name is spelled wrong or something, and I do something on the spreadsheet here, that change on the spreadsheet is not going to flow back into LegalServer. So it's a static, list of the data in that report or that list at that point in time. There's no further connection between the spreadsheet and LegalServer. The other thing is just standard with any application like this. You're downloading this data to your computer or the computer that you're working on at that time. So obviously you want to be careful about doing that. Do you control that computer? You probably have policies, saying you shouldn't just, download tons of data from your case management system and have that just, sitting around on your computer. All right, so I'm going to come back to my home page, and in contrast to the embedded reports, as I mentioned, we also have this other way to display data, which is based on, this is what's called a list in LegalServer. So I realize both of them are lists of data, but this is a capital L list in LegalServer. You can filter lists in LegalServer. There's a little icon that's a funnel. Some people say it looks like a golf tee. Take your pick. You can call it whatever you want. And if you click that, these filters will work the same way as the ones that we saw over on the main cases page in that embedded report. So you can, you can select something, and then you can say, I only want to see, I'll do legal problem code, and I'll select appeals and felony. So right now I have 2 cases on my list here. If I filter on appeals, felony, and GM, click the blue filter button, that's going to take this list down to 1. So filters on, especially on your My Assignments list, like I'm doing here, just as an example, may not be that useful to you, but depending on your caseload, you may find it useful to be able to filter by various things. Just like with an embedded report page, if I have filters applied here, I want to get back to my defaults, looking at all of my open and pending cases, I could click the little X to take off that legal problem code filter, or I could just refresh the page. And that's going to reset it to looking at all of my open and pending cases or open and pending cases I'm assigned to. And we have a question for somebody else about the non-indigent defense case intake. We expected to enter information in our retained clients into the system. I'm going to guess the answer is yes, since you have a non-indigent defense case intake, but I don't know the answer to that.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to follow the messages here. What's the specific question? I've got it.
It's from Brian Filter saying, I noticed there is a non-indigent defense case intake. Are we expected to enter information on our retained clients into the system?
I don't think you have to do that. That's for, that's to separate out your caseload regarding like 432B cases. You know, I will get back to you as to whether it's helpful to put in the other time that you spend on private cases. I mean, it'd be great to have a whole picture, but mostly that has to do with offices that do 432B cases and termination cases and those kinds of things, to separate those out from the indigent defense cases, the criminal cases.
All right. We have a couple of questions that are both are kind of related in terms of the answer. So a question about the number in front of the top charge is 52655. So charges in LegalServer are lookups that your site administrators control. Now, I realize you may have external, you know, agencies or departments or somebody mandating, you know, what you can use, but charges and also things like the problem code, legal problem code, special legal problem codes, gender, you know, race, all of those things are lookups in LegalServer. And all that means is that there are lists of information that your site administrators control. So I don't know the answer to what the 52655 is, but I do know to the extent that you all can control it, your site administrators have control over that. So they can include that, you know, or not include those numbers. All right, so one of the things that we also want to talk about is, you know, looking for information in LegalServer. So you may have noticed that there is a red search menu in the light bar below the dark green navigation bar. And if you float your mouse cursor over that, that'll show you the various things that you can search on in LegalServer. So you can search by case number, case ID, people, and so forth. So we'll look at some of these. The one that some of you may use a lot is the people search. And so the people search answering the question, is somebody in our database already? So, you know, for however you get a name and you want to determine if somebody is in the database, this is typically the best way to do it. So when I clicked on people, it brought up the little pop-up window, and you can see I can search on, you know, first, middle, last name, phone number, and social security number. The begins with checkboxes next to most of those fields do just what they kind of sound like. So if you weren't sure about the spelling of somebody's name or something like that, you know, you can put in one or more letters, and that would search for anybody whose first name begins with the letters JAN. the more information you put in, the more fields you fill out, the narrower your search is going to be. So I'm just going to run a quick search, and I think, if I remember right, I think I'm going to search for, if you have a limited set of data in your system, and I just want to try to get some results. So I'm going to search for Mike Smith. I'm going to click on continue. And okay, yeah, these are fairly decent results given the limited data set. So let's talk about what comes up in these search results here. The first thing that you may notice is at the bottom of the search list, I've got a little horizontal bar showing up here, scrolling. That's because I've got my screen zoomed in. So I want to get this sidebar temporarily out of the way so we can see what we're doing. To do that, and at any place in LegalServer you see the sidebar, you probably will have an icon up at the top of the sidebar that you can click on, and will let you toggle that off. And that's just an on-off toggle. So you click it again, sidebar comes back, click it again, it goes away. So the first thing we see on this page is to edit the search criteria, and we have a show button. This is just to give you an easy way to add to or change your search terms. And then you can click on the search button and rerun the search. So if you wanted to add a date of birth or a phone number or something like that, you could do that over here, just to keep you from having to go to the red search, clicking on people and re-entering your search there. The next thing you see on the screen is a big warning here. There may be persons in other offices or programs that are not displayed. So this is another instance where we're seeing you all have had us build it specifically. So your searches are going to be limited to information that is somehow linked to your office. And so that's why that warning is up there. In terms of the results, so you get a lot of information here, a lot of different columns. So we want to look at some of these. This database ID column will typically never be that useful to you. Then you get the name that LegalServer is matching on. And then if we skip for a second over to this type column, notice that the first person is a client, the second person is a non-adverse party family member. So that may or may not apply to a lot of your cases, but the main thing that I wanted to point out here is you're not just searching for people that are your clients, you're searching for clients, adverse parties, these family / non-adverse parties. If you all enter those, it can also search for additional names if any have been entered for a client. So aliases, former names would show up in search results, as well as contacts that are in your database. So coming back to the columns, the next column over other parties, that varies depending on your type of result. So for a client, it's going to show any adverse parties. For an adverse party result, like the second one we have here, it's going to show the client. The case result for a client is going to give you a case number, which is a clickable link that you can go directly to that case. Now, this is one of those places where if you came up and you've got, 3, 4, 5 results, and there were, multiple cases you might want to look at for determining which one was the case you were looking for. This is one of those places where you might want to right-click on a case number, open that case up in a new browser tab. Because what that will let you do is come over and look at the information on this case, get whatever you need, and then you can close that browser tab and you still have your search results over here. So you don't have to rerun your search, to get back to the results again. So the case number is showing up here. The date of birth, social security number, phone number, so pretty self-explanatory. There's an intake office is showing up here. Probably for the vast majority, if not all of your cases, the intake office and what we call the assigned office after intake is complete and a case is either pending or open. Those can be 2 different offices. I'm going to guess they're probably going to be the same in most of your cases. You're going to see the legal problem code. Then you're going to see the primary advocate. primary advocate is a little bit of a term of art in LegalServer. So LegalServer is very specifically built to require every pending and open case, and therefore by definition, every closed case, to have a primary advocate, which is a staff person assigned to it. And you can only have one primary advocate at any time. So we do that for a couple of reasons. One is just most organizations want to and or need to be able to slice and dice their data that way. So, you run a report, we've got, 600 open cases, that's fantastic, but we also need to know, who's the person primarily responsible for each one of those 600 cases. The other reason that we do that is if you think back to the home page on that My Assignments list that's showing me all the open and pending cases I'm assigned to, that means that every open and pending case is going to be on somebody's homepage. So you can't have a pending or open case in the database that's just floating around out there that nobody is responsible for and nobody is looking at. So every pending and open case is going to be on somebody's homepage. Now, the next three columns deal with disposition. So disposition may be kind of a new concept, at least the way that LegalServer uses it. And so it can kind of throw people initially, but you'll get used to it, especially once you start using LegalServer. It'll just become second nature to you. So I'll tell you the different dispositions that a matter record can have in LegalServer. So it can have a pre-screen disposition. It can have an incomplete intake disposition, can either be pending, open, or closed, or it can be what we call rejected. And a matter record can have any of those dispositions throughout its life. So your typical, matter record is going to be somebody does an intake. During that time, it's going to have the disposition of incomplete intake. Then it's going to become either a pending or an open case. Then somebody's going to close that case. And so that will be its life cycle. But as I say, at any time during the process, anytime during the life cycle of a case, depending on how you all have configured your site, you will also be able to reject something. So these three columns here, current disposition is saying that. So what's the current disposition of the result? So the first one is an open case. The second one I can see is an incomplete intake. The disposition status shows different things based on the current disposition. So for open cases, it's showing this field that we call the case status field. For closed cases, it would show you the reason that the case was closed. The disposition date is the last time that the disposition changed. So for this incomplete intake, this is saying somebody started this intake on December 2nd. For this pending case, or this open case, I should say, it's indicating that somebody switched the disposition to open on November 12th of last year. All right, and I see a question got asked about the primary advocate being changed, and so that's already been answered. Yes, and that's correct. You can change the primary assignment, primary advocate on a case at any time. The last column in the search results, the score column, the little series of stars there, is not what a lot of people would like it to be. It's not a way to rate your clients or their cases. It's a little more mundane than that. It's just telling you what LegalServer has matched on, and is telling you why a result, is showing up higher in the list than other results. So for that first result, I intentionally searched for Mike Smith versus Michael Smith, but I just wanted to show you that we get the Michael Smiths because the last name matches, but also because the nickname matches. So Mike is a nickname for Michael. And then the first name also, in addition to being a nickname match, sounds similar. So we're not just doing exact text matches when you do a search, we're also doing looks like and sounds like results as well. We have a question, is disposition status freeform text? No, it is not. That is, that's a combination of different lookups. So those are a fixed list of values that you can choose from. Those are things that your various lists that your site administrators can control. So the case status list is something you all control. Now the disposition, the ones, I mentioned those different dispositions, pre-screen, incomplete intake, pending, open, close, and rejected. That is not a list that your site administrators can control. So those are hard-coded into LegalServer. All right, so going back up to the search menu, some of the things, case number, that is going to be that, I think somebody referred to it as a county case number, county court number. This is going to be kind of what we looked at before when we were filtering. So I'm going to say I want to search for case number 12. And that is going to bring up a whole bunch of results. And I don't see the case number field in the results. So I think we may have some terminology distinctions going on here. So I was expecting it to search the case title field there and pull up that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 case. Going back to the search menu, you can search on case ID, which is the LegalServer assigned number that you see, and that's the clickable number in various places within LegalServer. That search is what I call a dumb search. And if you ever talk to one of my bosses, don't tell them I call it a dumb search. The reason I call it dumb is just because it is very limited. If you type in an exactly correct case number, case ID number, it will take you to that case. If you type in something that's missing a 0 or something like that, it will just tell you, no such case number in the system. So I actually just entered a kind of semi-random number, and this actually gives us it's a good example. So I wish I could say I intentionally did that, but it was a happy accident. So there is a case number. I don't remember what I entered, but 21 dash some amount of zeros, and I think 75. So this is telling me, so why am I seeing this? You're not allowed to view this profile. If I look up at the top here, it says restricted. So what this is telling me is there is a case number in your demo site, 21-4075, whatever I entered, but that must be a case in a different office than the one that I'm assigned to. And that's why I'm seeing this restricted. You're not allowed to view this profile. So I'll just go back and search on case ID again, and I'll show you the dumb version. So I'll just enter 3 zeros, which I don't think is enough, and yes. So hopefully you should be able to see on your screen, it says failure, unable to find case. So we have a question posted, the case is closed. You're going to be able to go back and add case notes, perform a billable task. The answer is probably. That is entirely up to your site administrators. By default in LegalServer, you can add notes to closed cases. Billable task, I'm not sure if I know exactly what you mean by that term in terms of converting it into LegalServer speak. But closed cases, by default, you can enter time slips on closed cases. A lot of organizations don't let you do that though, but that's something your site administrators control. All right, so going back and looking at the searches, some of these searches.
Ron, just wanted to add a quick note to that. One of the, and Stan, maybe you can address whether time can be entered after it's closed. We can reopen cases. That's one function, but another thing is before any case is closed, there's what's called a case review. And so you want to, before you close that case, you'll want to go back through it and make sure that it's not missing anything like, essential activities or timekeeping that still needs to be part of it. Stan, you want to add anything to that? We did put back in the reopen function, correct?
Yes, we did. So you should be able to reopen it, and if you're not able to add billable hours or something when it's closed, then I guess you could reopen it, add those hours or whatever you needed to update it, and then close it again.
Yeah, okay, that's what I thought. Thanks.
Okay. Good information. All right, so looking back at the search menu, there's some other searches here that may or may not be useful to you over time. You can search for, and I doubt you all represent what we call group clients, where your client's an organization versus an individual. But you can search for adverse party organizations. You can also search the contacts portion of your database. Contacts portion of your database, I don't know how you all are planning on using it, but you can add people to the contacts portion of your database. These are people who are not users, they're not clients, they're not, family members or anything like that. They can be people that you want to link to cases because they are, oh, Learned Hand is not in here. Is he inactive?
Hey, Ron, let me step in just real fast and Stan, you can help me answer this too, but Sherry, there are different designations, and I believe our designation right now has something to do with like a super user or something. Whoever the office manager is does have different editing permissions. Stan, can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I think that as far as the restricted, I think that's just for different offices or different counties. I think that the one office, the administrator or Sherry should have access to all the accounts and all the cases in that county's office.
Right. So as you go, if you have any questions, just please feel free to reach out to Stan and I as well. We can walk you through those kinds of things.
Okay. So I've just gone to the contacts section of your database, and I've just expanded it to show all of the active contacts that you currently have in here. Contacts can be in, as I say, for various reasons. These can be various people, these can be judges, these can be opposing counsel, these can be, translators, anybody you want in the database for some reason. The typical reason for most of our clients is they want to link those people to cases. So they want to be able to run a report that says, show me all the cases where Judge Hand was, the judge that was linked to the case, or, some other case contact was linked to the case. The organizations tab, which you can also, you also have a search for organizations that you have here as well. This is the same idea. You can have as many organizations as you want in the system. I can see somebody's gone through and put, some, if not all, of the courts, Nevada courts in here. And these also are, again, here for various reasons. You may want to, say that a case is in a particular, court, link to it. This list also is a filterable list. So just to kind of reinforce this idea of being able to filter various lists, I could come in here and I look at the filters, and I can see there's a default filter on organization type that is showing me by default all these different kind of organization types. But for example, if I wanted to see just the public defender organizations, I could select that and click on filter, and then the list went down, substantially. So I'm only looking, at public defender organizations. Changing the filters on lists like that or on embedded reports is, a temporary thing. And so if you want to get back to your full list, or the next time you come back to this page, it would be back at the full list with the default filters. And so I'll just refresh the page so we can get back to the defaults there. All right, a couple of other searches that you may find useful. You can search for documents that have been uploaded to cases in LegalServer. Well, I shouldn't say that. You can upload documents to different records within LegalServer. Some large percentage of the time, people are only interested in files that have been uploaded to cases. There's a lot of things that you can, different factors you can search on here. Most people are just going to be coming over and saying, you know, I want to see any file that's been uploaded that has the word test in the title. And we do have some, so we get 16 results. So this is just showing me the file name over on the left. And then it's showing me, you know, the document title, which can be different from a file name. The path to the document is showing me the case that the document is linked to. And that's a clickable link. For some of these cases, I'm seeing, you know, unauthorized here. On a lot of these, I'm going to guess that these are files that have been linked to cases that I'm not authorized to see. They're probably outside of my office. And so I'm curious, so I just have to see, because over on the right, there's a download icon. And I want to see what happens if I try to download an unauthorized file. So it is going to tell me I don't have permission to view this document, and contact your site administrator if you think you should be able to view it. This is one of the places, I wish we did this in a different way, like kind of just like in a pop-up window. But this is one of the places where you will, can and will need to use the back button in your browser. So I'm going to click on my back button, and that is going to take me back to my search results. We kind of caution people about using the back button in your browser, especially if you're doing data entry. Because if you're doing data entry and you click on your back button in your browser to go back to a previous page, you oftentimes will not be able to click then your forward button and, you know, not have lost data that you were entering on a page but hadn't saved yet. So just always be careful, especially if you're doing data entry, about using your back or forward buttons. Question about if you're using if you are an unauthorized user, will you be able to view the client name? No, that is all getting blocked from me. So my search results are only showing me things linked to my office, and as we see on the document search results here, I'm seeing unauthorized. I don't see the client name there. I have a question. Can you use Dropbox with LegalServer? We do have the ability to integrate with Dropbox, also with Google Drive, also with Microsoft SharePoint. That is something that you all as an organization would have to decide to buy that integration and support that. There's a couple more items in the search results. Similar to searching for documents, you can also, oh, actually you don't have a note search, so, which I probably understand why you don't have that. You can search for the organizations. There is a docket number field. I don't know if you're going to implement that. That's just a special field where you can put anything you want. But typically, organizations that use it put external court case numbers. A lot of our guardian ad litem and juvenile dependency clients love having that because they like to be able to search by a court case number, especially in juvenile dependency. You know, kids are in different cases and they move around and so forth. The final search item is the help documentation. That is actually going to open automatically another browser tab for you and take you to our help site. This is the same help site all organizations see in LegalServer. It's a publicly accessible site. You can go to it at any time. You don't need to be logged into LegalServer. It's help.legalserver.org. A lot of the information over here is geared towards site administrators. There is some information that is useful for people who are not. So you have the introduction overview to using LegalServer, which is talking about a lot of the things that we've talked about during this session. There is also the ever popular Quick Start LegalServer in 5 minutes for advocates. So you may find this useful. We built this page basically in response to requests from law schools, but other organizations, other advocates find it useful. But, law schools, they wanted to, because they have some, new users every semester. They wanted, a place that they could point, their incoming students and say, go spend 5 minutes looking at this page. And this is really going to tell you all you need to know about using LegalServer. Now, most of you are going to use LegalServer, I'm sure, to a greater extent than law students. But this is not, a bad page to look at, although we've talked about, a lot of the things on here. All right, so we want to switch gears here now and go through at least your one intake. To do that, I'm going to go back to the home page. And we want to walk through your indigent defense intake. Now, I realize some people on the call may never do an intake. So you may have, people that enter intakes. And if you're a case handler, you may never see a case until somebody goes through the intake and, gets it to a pending or an open case, and you get assigned to it. It shows up on your homepage on your My Assignments list. This can be helpful for you to see for a couple of reasons, even if you'll never do an intake. One is to see, what information is being collected, and so why you're seeing, X, Y, or Z when you get an open case, or why you don't see X, Y, or Z when you get an open case. Also, probably some of the elements that we're going to see on the intake is you will see after you have a case open. So like editing charges, changing things like, legal problem codes and so forth, you will see. Also, it'll be a good introduction to you in terms of just, entering data into LegalServer. So I'm just going to go ahead and click on the indigent defense intake. Now on the demo site, there are some things at the top of some of these pages, like this Learn About section. Probably you won't see that on your live site. Those will go away, but that's entirely up to your site administrators. If you notice over on the left-hand side, we have several steps that we need to go through to ultimately, if we're going to get to either a pending or those, you can kind of see them, because otherwise they're in very light gray text. So a common question at this point is, okay, I see where we're gonna do a conflict check. We're gonna look for adverse parties, enter some charges and stuff. But what's the magic shortcut to just go to the very end and open up a case? I'll come back and I'll do all that other stuff later. I promise I will. But what's the magic shortcut? There is not a magic shortcut. So LegalServer is very specifically designed to force you to go through an intake in order. What you all control is how many steps are here. You also, your site administrators control on each one of these forms, what's required, what's not required, and so forth. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. So we're on this initial information page. So the first thing we see in terms of the meat of the page is I see intake office, and notice that intake office, it shows me this is defaulting to my office. I'm pulling from my user account, and this is just showing me this information in read-only form. I can click on this, but I can't do anything with it. And that makes total sense the way you all are kind of restricting cases. Case type is a required field. It's required, I can tell, because of the little red star next to it. And it's defaulting to appointed. If I click and drop down, you can see this is actually, there's only two options for this list, appointed and pro bono. But this is the first of these lists we've seen that I've been mentioning that your site administrators control what you see when you go to fill in a given field. County jurisdiction, same thing. This is a drop-down list that your site administrators control. So they can change this over time, but looks like this is probably, not surprisingly, going to be the counties that you serve. I'm going to leave this unselected, this required field, just because I want to show you what happens when you miss a required field. And I don't know if show all values is actually going to give you, it doesn't look like it gives you a longer list. Then we get to the applicant information. We can see that first and last name are required. So I'm going to put in, I'm in trouble. Date of birth, social security number work the same way, or they're configured to work the same way. So by default, it's saying you know the date of birth and it's a required field. You know the social security number and it's a required field. It looks like you're probably only collecting the last 4 digits of social security number. But what would you do if you don't know the date of birth for some reason? Do you have to enter a fake, normally you would have to enter a fake date of birth in there, which is not good for your database integrity, your data integrity, I should say. So you do have 2 options. You have unknown or refused. So if you don't know it, you can select that. Notice that required field goes away. Same thing for social security number status. If you don't know the social security number or they don't have one, you can select either one of those options and that required field goes away. Now, you could very well have policy that says, well, after you get a case open, then somebody's supposed to try to get that information. But just want to show you do have it set up so you don't have to enter fake information. DOB status and SSN status also have a little question mark icon icon next to them. This is something that also that your site administrators control. For most of the fields in the database, they can put in what we call help text on fields. If they do that, then the field will show this little question mark icon, and then floating your mouse cursor over the question mark icon will show whatever help text has been entered there. We have a language field here. The language field, always use this as an example to show that the lookup fields, the various lookup fields here, do have type ahead. So if I type in, once I've selected the language field, if I type SP, it'll jump me down to Spanish. TH will take me to Thai, EN to English, and so forth. You're not required to use that. You can always click and then scroll and select. Also, I'm going to be using my mouse very kind of slowly and deliberately so you can see where I'm clicking. But if you're a keyboard type person, often doesn't show up that well. I've hit Shift Tab and that's moved, put the focus, 2 fields higher in the page. So right now you may not be able to see there's a little blue, border around DOB status. So I could, change that to refused. And then I can tab forward into the various fields. So interpreter needed is just a simple yes or no field. Race is not required. It's a drop down. Again, another list of values your site administrators control. Gender is the same thing. Applicant contact information, is the person institutionalized? If you say yes, you're going to have the chance to pick an institution here. This is a list of organizations that your site administrator or somebody has entered. Probably more than just your site administrators have the ability to enter organizations. And so if you select one of those organizations and it has address information, that'll be populated for you into your fields down here. If the person is not institutionalized, and let me just temporarily wipe out this information. Then if you enter a zip code, so if I put in 89316, if I enter a Nevada zip code, and I can't type very well, you'll see that it'll fill out the city and the state for you. We have a question, can we type in the type of interpreter needed, for example, ASL? Right now you can't. Your site administrators can set up this form. So if you say interpreter needed yes, another field would pop up here, and that could be a free form text field, or it could be a drop down list of like type of interpreter. So you could say, or it can just be the language field and say, language needed, so that you could have one language, up here. And let's just see, you'll select, yeah. So oftentimes this form will be configured. So if you select anything other than English, it will prompt you and say, do they speak any English, and various other questions. But kind of a long answer to your question, which is yes, you all can configure it to do that. And it's entirely up to you. All right, so I'm gonna just put in anything here and the street address. You have a Google Map link. Well, actually, so I'll show you that. So that may be helpful to you, and that will do just probably what you would expect. It's going to open another browser tab, and it's going to try to map that the address that you've entered. So it's going to show you, 10 South Main Street in Eureka. All right. Oh, I'm sorry. Entering the zip code like that also set the county of residence to Eureka down here. You have a checkbox here. Check below if the mailing address is different from the home address. So if you check that box, you get mailing address fields here that you can enter. You have various phone number fields that you can enter. Each phone number can have a note next to it. I'm going to put in a 7-digit number to see if you all are enforcing 10 digits. You have a show button to show additional numbers and also to designate one of the phone numbers as the client's preferred phone. Which phone numbers can be texted? This is a multi-select list. It tells you out to the left if you hold down your control key or command key on a Mac, then while you're holding down your control key, your mouse clicks or trackpad taps become on-off toggles. So you can select business and mobile, it can deselect business and say, mobile and home and so forth. I have a question. Does LegalServer offer a mobile app? No, we don't have a mobile app other than the offline application that we mentioned earlier. But it will, there are, it tries to be responsive if you're on your phone. And so like the various menus will show up differently on your phone so that they're selectable. So you should find it, pretty useful on your phone. Even I can use it on my phone, and I'm not very phone able. But although I'm getting to where I can actually, type on my phone a little bit better, but certainly prefer a full keyboard. Email address is an optional field, and then you can enter some intake notes here. This intake notes box will probably follow along with us in the intake. I want to take a second and talk about these notes boxes because you're going to see these in many places in LegalServer, not just for intake notes. And so there's a couple of things that I always like to point out. One is you're not limited to the amount of text that you can see on the screen. So I've typed in a whole bunch of gibberish, and you might be able to see that a little scroll bar has shown up here on the side. Also, most browsers will present you with a draggable handle on the lower right corner of most of these text boxes. You've probably seen this on other websites as well. And that will just let you temporarily, expand this box so you can just see more. If you're typing a lot of information, you may just find it more comfortable to be able to see more that you're typing there. If I kept typing, my scroll bar would show up again over here on the right-hand side. May also be able to see that a lot of the gibberish that I've typed in there, it's got red wavy lines under it, indicating misspelled words. Spell checking is a function of your browser, not of LegalServer. Most all of the modern browsers offer spell checking by default, and it's on by default. If you get to one of these text boxes and you notice the spell checking is not happening, just right click inside of that text box and you should see the option to turn on spell checking. So it's already on for me, and I think Chrome calls it spell checking, Firefox calls it check spelling. So let me get rid of this gibberish here. And I'm just going to say my initial intake notes. Common question is, if I've copied information, from some other source into my clipboard, can I paste it into these notes fields? Answer is yes, you can definitely do that. All right, so I've filled out a form and I'm ready to save that information to the database. most of your forms, to save information into the database, you're going to need to click a button at the lower right corner of the page. That can vary, but for the most part, it's going to be at the last thing at the lower right of any given page. The label may say continue, the label may say save, the label may say save and continue. For most of those buttons, your site administrators control the label on a page, but the default is continue. And so I just kind of glossed over this, save in the database concept, but I do want to make it very clear and explicit that when you're filling out a form like this information is, is currently being saved in your browser. This has not been transmitted from your browser back to the database and saved in LegalServer until you click on, a continue button or a save button or something like that. There's some exceptions to this, but for the most part, that's the way it works. So you're filling out a form, whether it's an intake form, a case note form, a time slip, whatever it happens to be. What do you not want to do before you've clicked on a continue or a save button? Well, you would not want to click on your back button in your browser. You don't want to close your browser tab up here, and so forth. So kind of relatively obvious. But there's also the idea of, you're filling out a form and then you stop. And then if you don't do anything within LegalServer for a set amount of time, your session's going to get timed out. And this information that you've put on the form and haven't saved yet is not going to be saved in the database. I'm sure you've seen this on other websites where you log in, you do things, then you go off and do other things. You come back to that website, it says, for security purposes, your session has been timed out. You need to log back in. So LegalServer does the same thing. The default is 60 minutes. Your site administrators can bump that up to, I think, 3 hours is the current limit. But the basic idea is, you're filling out a form like this and, don't know if any of you are actually, jumping to go to hearings at courthouses, and so forth. But, oh, it's, time for me to run to my hearing or to a meeting, wherever it is. Just make sure you click on continue, because if you're gone more than the timeout limit, you would come back to your computer if you're not taking it with you. And you would see your session had been timed out and you would have to re-enter that information. All right, so I want to go ahead and click on continue. So you can see over on the left, we're still on the initial information and indigent defense form, and that's because I have not filled out all the required fields on a form, and I'm being told that at the top of the page up here. And so that's highlighted, and it's also highlighting all the required fields that I've missed, which in this case is only the one, this county jurisdiction. So I've not lost the information that I've, entered so far on the page because my browser is still, holding on to that information for me. So I'm going to come down and select Eureka, click on continue. And so now we're on the second step of the intake, which is where we're doing the forced conflict search. But I also want to point out a couple of things before we move along. Is notice up here in this area that we call the breadcrumbs, that I now see, a client's name and a case number that's been assigned by LegalServer. So now I've saved this record in the database. So now I can, I can stop for the day. I can, close my browser. I can do anything else. And this record is in the database. Now I want to go back to my home page and show you where this is living. So on my home page, on my incomplete intakes tab, I can see there's the I'm in trouble incomplete intake. It's on my home page because I started the intake. Now, other people can see this intake. Other people could go to it and finish it up, work on it, so it's not, only mine. But since I started it, it shows up on the home page. If I go to the cases tab and look at the incomplete intakes embedded report over here, that is limited to intakes in my office. I will be able to find I'll just see, I think I can sort this by client name. And I guess I'll just do view all to expand the list. And yep, there's I'm in trouble down there at the bottom of the list. Because it's being sorted by case numbers get created, sequentially. So that's why it showed up at the bottom of the list. Probably the easier way I could have found this would have been to reverse the sort by clicking on the little triangle. There's I'm in trouble would show in there. All right, for me or anybody else to look at and work on this intake, just need to click on the case number that LegalServer generated. That's going to jump me back or try to jump me back to the last place where, I was in the intake. So that is the conflict check stage. This is doing a conflict check on the name. I'm in trouble. Again, notice we've got our warning up here at the top. This is only looking through cases that are, assigned to my office. I have a couple other things that I can do on this page. I can add additional names for this person. So if this person has aliases, that you need to enter or want to enter, you can come in and say, this person has gone by an alias, I got in trouble. If I want to enter an additional name, either an alias or a former name or a maiden name, I have a save and search button here. So LegalServer forces me to do a conflict search on that additional name, which I don't get any results here for that, not too surprisingly. But now that name is in the system as an additional name for I'm in trouble. I can click that button again. I can add another additional name, rinse and repeat as many times as you need to. Associated persons is something I can also enter at this point. So if you have associated persons, you can enter first and last name and then select a relationship. So the relationship dropdown is a list that your site administrators control. So you can see here you've got co-client, co-defendant, child, grandchild, and so forth. Likewise, if you enter an associated person, you have to do a conflict search on them. Neither one of those are changing the applicant's name, the potential client's name. It's just adding additional people.
I have a question, Ron.
Yeah.
Somebody previously asked, like, if we had a certain case, like a 403B civil case where there's several children involved, could we add those as associated person?
Yes, you definitely can. Where and when you add people is really more of a policy question for the organization. But yes, as you can kind of see from the relationship type down here, this is a common place to put kids in.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. And you can do multiples just like you can with additional names. So, if this was, kid trouble, I could put in kid trouble. I'd have to do a conflict search on kid trouble. Not going to get any, potential hits. But I could come down, here's kid trouble, has been added. I could click this button again. I could add, second kid, third kid, as many as you need to. Shows me some information about the applicant here. Notice the intake notes box has followed along with us. And so I can put in, even more notes here. Also notice here's a good example of, the button to save and move along, to save the information on this form and move along is not just continue, it's continue to adverse party. So one of your site administrators or somebody went in and changed the label on that button. Can we add fields to the relationship field? The relationship drop down here, if that's the question, yes, that's a list that you all control. So you can have anything in the world that's going to make sense for you all in there. All right, so I'm going to continue on to the adverse party. So the default on the adverse party page is there is no adverse party. If that's true, I can just click continue and move along with the intake. LegalServer has the ability to enter 3 different types of adverse parties. So I just want to show you these. So you can enter an individual adverse party, and that's somebody who, a natural person who has a first and last name. So I'm going to say, on this case, I'm adverse is an adverse party. Relationship type, you can say, pick one of these. These are all, this is another list that your site administrators control. I'm just going to say other. There's a lot of other fields that I can collect information for an individual adverse party. None of those are required. There is an adverse party alert text box here. If you put text in this box and this person's name came up in a search, later in a search, their name would appear in red, and any text you put in this box would show up, or somebody would be able to float their mouse cursor over the red name in the search results and see whatever had been put into this adverse party alert box. So I need to do a conflict search on the adverse party that I've added. So I'll come back down on the field, or on the page, I should say. An organization adverse party is the same thing, but instead of first, middle, last, you have a business name. So I'm going to put in my favorite, Bubba's Fine Wine Emporium and Towing Service. The completion there, you might have noticed as soon as I started typing Bubba, it offered, to put in to auto complete that for me. That's not a function of LegalServer, that's a function of your browser. So my browser knows that often for business name fields, I enter Bubba's Fine Wine Emporium and Towing Service, so it's offering that to me as a completion. Relationship type, I'm just going to go ahead and select other again. Click on save and search. The final type of adverse party I can add is what we call a common adverse party. This is a list, I'm not searching here, I'm just picking from a list. And this is a list of, if you all are going to use this, of organizations, agencies, can even be, businesses that your site administrators have entered. You all have decided, you will never have a conflict with any of these common adverse parties. And so if you select one of these, you have a button down here just to add the party to the case, and LegalServer won't even bother doing a conflict search. So now I've got one of each of the 3 types of adverse parties I can add. You are not limited to one of each of these types. You can add as many adverse parties as you need. You don't have to do them in any specific order. So you could add 2 individuals, then an organization, then come back and add another individual, vice versa. So I just went through them in order, but you're not required to add them in order. Once you've entered all the adverse parties, you can click on continue to move on to the next step. This is the charge information form. So I am required to select a legal problem code descriptive. This is a list that your site administrators control. Are you getting tired of me saying that yet? So I'm just going to select one of these. And then I've got a charges section here. So it's got a list that's showing me there's no charges yet on this intake, not surprisingly. I have a button here that I don't want, if I don't want to add any charges, I click that and notice all that charges stuff goes away, and I can just click continue and move on. If I do want to enter a charge, you can see you've got an arraignment date, which is optional, a charge date, which is required. You can type in a date there. You have a little calendar icon that you can click on to pick a date that way. Charge is a required field. This is a list of values. This is a little bit different list. This is a search and select list because there's so, there's so many charges that are available. You can probably tell from the scroll bar if you can see it. This is a very long list. So we give you the option. You can scroll through this list, but you can also start typing. And if I type the word driver, it's going to show me just charges that contain driver, in the charge there. Is this the top charge on the case? The little question mark icon tells me this charge must be set as the top charge. Sorry, I'm having trouble talking this afternoon, since there is no other top charge associated to this matter. Disposition is optional. There's actually nothing available in the dropdown right now. Then I can, if this is the only charge I want to enter, I can just click continue and move along. I also have the option to save this charge and to add another charge. So I'll show you what that's going to do. So it's going to refresh the page. It's going to show me there is now a charge stored with this matter. And then I have the same fields here to add a second charge. All right, I won't bother doing that. I'll just go ahead and click on continue to move on to the next page, which is the add arraignment event form. So this is going to create a calendar event in LegalServer. It's going to be linked to this intake. To create it, you're just required to enter the title. So I'm just going to say my title. Location is optional. The type is also optional. It's defaulting to hearing. But this is another list of values that you all control. The start date and time is going to it's going to default to starting today at the top of the next hour. The reason you're seeing 5 o'clock here is I'm on the East Coast. I forgot to change my time zone for your site to, I think you're on Pacific time. So if I had remembered to do that, then that would show, what would that show? 2 o'clock. So that's going to be the default. Of course, you can change this as you need to. Calendar events, it's going to default. You can have multiple attendees. It's going to default to you, the person filling out the form. You actually can remove yourself, but you can also go ahead and add some other people. So I'm getting my organizations confused, sorry. And so I can add John Williams to this. I can also add Thomas to this as an attendee and so forth. So this would appear, you may recall on your homepage, you see your calendar events. And this means that would appear on my homepage, John's homepage, and also on Thomas's homepage. I forgot to point out, you probably saw it. You also have the option up here to not add an arraignment event if you don't need to. That would just take all this stuff away. But since I bothered filling out the form, I'll go ahead and click on continue. Custodial status. We don't have an option to not do this like we've had on some of these other forms. So we do have to pick one. Again, another list that you all control. I'm going to say this person's on pretrial release on their own recognizance. There's a details field here, which is currently empty. This may not be set up to do anything at this point, but at some point it might, depending on what you select for custodial status, it might populate a different list here. I've got an option to add a note at this point. I have to pick a start date. And again, I'm just going to use the date picker and pick a date there. The related charge or charges is going to populate here. I'm not required to select anything, but if their custodial status is related to one or more charges that have been entered, you can select those. Institution, I assume if the person's institutionalized. So let's see, if I put in jail, then you can put that in there. I'm going to click on continue to move us along to the penultimate step of our intake. And this is the edit court / case information. So the first thing we're seeing up here is all the people that have currently been linked to this case. And we're seeing what their role in the case is, and if we have it, some other information about them. So, I added I'm Adverse as an adverse party, added Bubba's Fine Wine Emporium as an adverse party. Demo Trainer is me. So I'm assigned to this incomplete intake. I'm in trouble as the client. Social Security Administration, I also added as a common adverse party, and kid trouble I put in as a kid. Court info, you have a caption, which is optional, and then the court is a drop-down list of courts that you all have entered, and that's a required field. So I'm going to select one of the Eureka counties, and then case number, not required, but I'm going to put in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Click on continue. The last step of the intake, we are typically, we're going to select disposition here. It's defaulting to accept this as a case, which would open this, change this from the disposition of incomplete intake into an open disposition. You do have two other options here. You can reject at this point, which means this would not ever become a case. It would be treated, it would be a rejected matter, would be the new disposition for it. And you can also say that you want to change the disposition over to pending. So your default is accept, and probably some large percentage of the time, when you get to this far in an intake, you're not going to be rejecting. You can optionally change the case status at this point. So it's whatever case status here is going to make sense. You can enter some optional notes there. And then we have to create the primary assignment. So as I mentioned before, we had that primary advocate column, and I said every pending and open case in LegalServer must have a staff person, assigned at all times as a primary assignment. So this is where that's happening. So I lied just a little bit, because the primary assignment actually is the person and also an office. So the office is defaulting here to probably to the intake office. The primary assignment is defaulting to me, the person filling out the form. I can, if it's appropriate, select from other people in this list. But I'm sure you have policy around who you should select as the primary assignment. Funding code is defaulting, but I do have two options here, CO for county, NV for state and Nevada. Again, which funding code you should pick, that's all organization policy that, I don't know what are the correct answers.
Hey, Ron, I wanted to step in and answer the question, or at least briefly, and maybe you can help me. But if when you're entering a case, a conflict is shown that requires it to be either kicked to an alternate PD's office or to a conflict appointed case or appointed attorney, then that's what happens. It just gets transferred to whoever is appointed next, right? And we'll change the attorney, and then the file goes over to them. Is that correct?
If you change the primary assignment?
Right. So you find out you have a conflict and you've got to assign it to a different attorney. That's a shorter way to say it.
Yeah, if so if I came down here and picked Maureen, then she would be the primary assignment on the case. Would it stay in the same office, or would it go to a different office?
It would go to a different office. If the office had a conflict, it has to go to a different office.
Okay. And yeah, so if you picked a different office here, then once you submitted this form, then this case would actually become restricted as far as, my office. So if I picked, one of the Carson City offices and clicked on continue, then what should happen is I would actually then see a profile that says, I don't have permission to view this case, and that it's restricted because it's in a different office than me.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
And then Margaret just asked about the main case notes. I know you're probably going to get to that, or maybe you talked about it, but there is a place where all of the intake notes that are at the bottom of all these fields that you can look at from the case screen, right? after you
Yeah.
get through this intake?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll show you that briefly. And I'm sure you have a session at some point coming up called Working on Cases. We'll talk in detail about, how to add case notes, where the case notes live, and all that.
Right.
Couple of other things on this form. You can also, as I mentioned, you have to have you must have a primary advocate. You optionally can have additional assignments on cases. So I could come in and say, somebody else is an additional assignment on a case. And you can add those and so forth after the case is open. There is a notes box here for new assignment information. And below that is a choose recipients button. I'll just briefly mention, because it's covered more in the working on cases session, and some places in LegalServer where you can enter notes, you can also send an email message to one or more people, and that would send them an email. Would contain whatever you put in the notes. And so I'm not going to do this because I don't want the case to unexpectedly go away from me. But, let's say I was, assigning this case to Thomas. I could say, hey, Thomas, assigning you this case. Have fun. And I could click on choose recipients, and I could either type in Thomas's email address. I can also do a search and select here. And then what would happen is when I submitted this form, it's going to open this as a case. It's going to record a case note that I entered up here. It's also then going to generate an email message and send that to Thomas. He's going to get it. It would say it's coming from me. And it would say, assignment information on a case. And then whatever I typed into the note up here would be in the body of the note. He would also get a link in the email message directly back to this case. So my intake notes box is, popped up again. I can add more intake notes if I need to. Click on continue. I now have a case in the system. And so this is what a case looks like, at least a criminal case. This is being displayed with a criminal profile. You can have different profiles for cases. So you could have, a profile that has criminal profile that, cases look one way, and a civil one that they look different. That's all, up to you all. Since we asked about case notes, if I come down a little bit farther on the page here, if I click on this case notes tab, I can see all of the notes that have been entered so far on this case. So there's the intake notes that I entered. There's the notes that I entered when I pretended that I was going to be assigning this case to Thomas, and so forth. So as I say, I'm sure you have a session which will include, if not entirely be devoted to, how to work on cases. The final thing that I want to show you, in addition to answering any questions people have, I want to go back to my home page. Remember on my, when I started, I'm in trouble, when it was still an incomplete intake that lived on my home page on this list, it's gone now. It's now showing up on my assignments list because I'm assigned to it and it's a pending or an open case. And so it's showing up here. And likewise, when we went to the main cases page before, we looked at the incomplete intakes list and we saw, I'm in trouble over here. I'll reverse the sort and you can see, I'm in trouble is gone from this list. And that's because I'm in trouble is showing up over here on the pending and open cases list. All right, so we've covered a ton of stuff, and I know 2 hours is most people's limit for absorbing new information. I am happy to answer any questions that people have. We don't have any follow-up questions. I don't know if Thomas or Stan or anybody else has any final comments that they want to make.
See if anybody has a question, but Stan, did you have something to say?
Well, I remember that somebody asked a question about if one attorney worked in 2 different offices. And we can accommodate that. I think we just have to do it on our end versus the office doing it on their end. So if you give us that information in advance, we can set it up fairly easily that they can work out of 2 offices and still only see the cases they're assigned to. So
Thanks,
hopefully
Dan. Can you
that
turn
answers.
off that mic? There's a lot of feedback. Thanks. If there are any other questions just that you think of after this or that you have as you go through this, obviously just please feel free to email us. We are recording this. It will be up on our YouTube channel with a link on our website. The next level of training, there will be 2 next week, Tuesday and Thursday, again from noon to 2. We'll be recording those as well. And then there's advanced training the next 2 weeks after that. Again, we're wanting to walk you all through this as we go. So any questions along the way, just let us know. Ron, thank you so much for your presentation today. It's really interesting looking at how there's 2 different ways to present the same information, but that was very informative and thank you.
Good. Yeah, I hope it was helpful. So I don't know if you're going to post a copy of Leah's training as well. So my final thought for folks is if you see Leah's session, you may want to watch it. So she's better than I am. But,
she's not better. It's just different, and that part of it's really interesting.
yeah.
Thank you. No, you were very good.
Okay, good. Well, I hope everybody has a good rest of the day. Not to rub it in, but I'm on the East Coast, so it's quitting time here. So, all right. Goodbye, everybody.
All right. Take care.